Dopoledne jsme se věnovali wellbeingu studentů, studujících, teďka se budeme věnovat wellbeingu učitelů. Já bych vám jenom ještě chtěl oznámit, že už zase natáčíme, ty workshopy se z většiny nenatáčely, tak jenom ať s tím počítáte. A bude nás opět čekat panelová diskuze a úplně posledním bodem dne budou opět workshopy, ale ještě předtím právě budeme mít váženého zahraničního hosta, kterou bude Sharon Hoover z Univerzity Maryland a tu nám představí a diskuzi s ní povede Lenka Felsmanová, kterou tady zvu.
Tak Sharon, doufám, že nás slyšíš, ten potlesk je pro tebe. Dovolte mi představit nesmírně milou expertku na oblast duševního zdraví, podpory wellbeingu ve školách, paní doktorku Sharon Hoover, která je klinickou psycholožkou a profesorkou na Univerzitě státu Maryland. Zároveň vede Národní centrum pro podporu duševního zdraví ve školách, je ředitelkou Centra pro bezpečné a podporující školy, tak krásně se to centrum jmenuje. Je spoluautorkou mnoha programů, které se využívají ve světě, například v podpoře dětí s uprchlickou zkušeností a traumatem z války. Je velkou expertkou na dětské trauma a jeho léčbu. A je také spoluautorkou programu Teacher Wise, který se zaměřuje na podporu wellbeingu učitelů. Tento program vznikl v Centru pro podporu wellbeingu ve škole, takže tady ty všechny krásné instituce Sharon reprezentuje a já jsem jí poprosila, protože se osobně známe zase skrze právě podporu dětí, které byly zasaženy válečným konfliktem na Ukrajině a přišli do České republiky a díky Sharon se tady šíří program Strong, tak já jsem jí dneska požádala, aby představila nějaké myšlenky, které se týkají podpory wellbeingu učitelů a také nějaké konkrétní právě tipy z programu Teacher Wise, kterými se velmi inspirujeme právě i třeba při tvorbě materiálu zaměřených na podporu wellbeingu ve škole. Tak ještě jednou, Sharon, veliké díky, že jsi přijala naše pozvání. A já samozřejmě teď nechám Sharon prezentovat a potom moc ráda povedu diskuzi na základě dotazů od vás.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lenka. I'm hearing an echo on my end. So I don't know the technical and address the echo on my end. I'll try again. I continue to hear myself. I can try to turn off my computer to see if that helps. Let me test one more time. Okay, I think it's been fixed now. So hopefully you all can hear me. And thank you again, Lenka, and to Sofa, and also to the interpreters who are going to be translating for us today. They've asked that I try to speak slowly, and I will do my best. I tend to speak quickly, so I will try to slow down a bit. But thank you again for inviting me to speak with you at this very important event on well-being. And I'm so pleased that you are focusing some of your time on educator well-being and staff well-being. I've had the pleasure of visiting Prague a couple of times in the last 2 years, and I wish I could be there with you in person today. I had some conflicts with my schedule, so I'm coming to you virtually. But I'm so impressed after having visited with all that you're doing to support students and families and schools. So thank you again for the invitation. And I'll be talking today about both personal well-being and organizational well-being. So what we can do for ourselves as educators and what our schools and organizations can do for us and in terms of well-being. As Lenka mentioned, I co-direct the National Center for School Mental Health in the United States. And our center has been around since 1995 with funding from our federal government in the United States. And our mission is to strengthen policies and programs in school mental health to improve learning and promote success for America's youth. As Lenka said, our work extends beyond America, and I've had the privilege of working with many countries, including the Czech Republic. So let's start with a cartoon. As the school year started this year, you may have experienced this if you are an educator. So you can see this person is lifting the blanket saying, "Sweetie, you have to come out. It's the first day of school." And of course, we think this is a student hiding in their bed. And then we see, "No, I refuse to go. They can get someone else to teach my classes." So this is a teacher who is struggling to get up and go to work. And of course, this may apply to many educators, but it also applies to some of our students. And it makes sense that some of our educators are struggling to go to work, given how challenging teaching and learning has been amidst and following a global pandemic. Many have noted that teaching has been incredibly stressful in the last 2 or 3 years, but even before the pandemic, educators reported relatively high levels of stress when compared with other professions. I'm going to share with you a national survey called the Quality of Life Survey that was conducted by our American Federation of Teachers. And we had over 30,000 respondents give us some insight into the stress and stressors for educators. So as illustrated here, only 8% of the responding educators noted that they never or hardly ever experienced work as stressful. Almost 1/4 of teachers said that work was always stressful, and 2/3 indicated that work was sometimes or often stressful. And this quote likely captures the sentiments of many educators. It says, "This job is stressful, overwhelming, and hard. I am overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, questioned, and blamed for things that are out of my control." Oops. The second quote notes the impact of work stress on physical health. "For the past 8 years, my blood pressure is consistently 20 points higher during the school year than in the summer." When compared to other professionals, educators are more likely to report more days of poor mental health. And as illustrated here, about half of teachers report 4 or more days in the last 30 days when their mental health was not good, as compared to only about 1/4 of other professionals. And of note, many educators with mental health challenges do not feel that they have the support that they need to address these challenges. This teacher notes, "There isn't much support for teachers suffering from mental health issues. We are worried that it will be a reason to be given negative evaluations or fired." So many of our teachers worry that if they share their mental health challenges, it will be used against them. This is a lot of numbers on a slide, so let me give you the big picture. According to a research report from RAND, post-pandemic, the well-being of teachers continues to suffer. About twice as many teachers and principals report experiencing frequent job-related stress as the general population of working adults in January 2022. More teachers and principals than other working adults reported symptoms of depression and not coping well with their job-related stress. More teachers than other working adults reported burnout, and about half as many teachers reported feeling resilient to stressful events compared with other working adults. Teachers and principals' experiences of job-related stress and their ability to cope with stress are consistent with the January 2021 results. So the key findings from this major report were that teachers and principals reported worse well-being than other working adults. Poor well-being and adverse working conditions were associated with teachers and principals' intentions to leave their job, while supportive school environments were linked to better well-being and decreased likelihood of intentions to leave, which is why we want to focus on organizational well-being today. And finally, although many teachers and principals reported experiencing poor well-being and difficult working conditions, it's also the case that many educators did report coping well with their job-related stress, intending to stay in their jobs, finding joy in work, even during difficult times. So it's not all bad news. Many teachers still intend to stay and are finding ways to cope, but we need to do more to support them. We know that educators have been leaving the profession in higher rates during and since the pandemic than before the pandemic. And you can see here some of the top reasons that educators give for leaving the field, including salaries and wages that don't keep up with the cost of living, shortages of teachers and staff, and a lack of respect and support for teachers and staff. McKinsey and Company did a study that recently looked at factors that drive educators to stay in their roles and factors that drive them to leave their roles as educators. And compensation was indicated both as a reason to leave and a reason to stay. Teachers feel that they're not being paid enough, but they need to stay in their job to make a living. And notably, well-being and some of the factors that are associated with organizational well-being, like meaningful work, workplace flexibility, and community, are also highlighted. So it sounds like this morning you focused on well-being, so you may already have definitions of well-being, but I want to focus on two areas of well-being that are important when we try to address teacher burnout and attrition. So we need to focus both on individual or personal well-being, which is defined as a state of feeling satisfied, fulfilled, and having a sense of meaning or purpose, and organizational well-being, which is an organization's efforts to promote and maintain the physical, psychological, and social health for all employees. So this is what the organization is doing to support the individuals. We know that promoting well-being for school staff is important to prevent or reduce stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue. And we will speak to that in a moment. But educator well-being is also important because it can improve the lives of those staff both at work and at home. It optimizes our ability to be fully engaged in our work in schools and to deliver professional skills. But it also optimizes our ability to engage in meaningful relationships with our family, with our friends, and with our community. So you may have heard of the compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue model. I'll just define these terms quickly. Compassion satisfaction is about the pleasure that you derive from being able to do your work. For example, you may feel pleasure to help others through what you do at work, and you may feel positively about your colleagues or your ability to contribute to the work setting or even to the greater good of society through your work with people that you need to take care of, including your students. On the other side of compassion satisfaction is compassion fatigue. And that is the negative aspects of helping those who experience stress or suffering, or just teaching in general. We may experience compassion fatigue. And there are two parts to compassion fatigue. Burnout is one element. Most people have an idea of what burnout is. From a research perspective, burnout is associated with feelings of hopelessness and difficulties dealing with work or doing your job effectively. Burnout usually comes on gradually, and it can reflect the feeling that your efforts are not making a difference. Or they can be associated with very high workload or a non-supportive work environment. Secondary traumatic stress is the second element in compassion fatigue. And this is about your work-related secondary exposure to stressful events. So, for example, you may repeatedly hear stories about stressful or traumatic events that happen to other people. If your work puts you directly in danger, like if you are a soldier, you may be exposed to immediate or primary exposure. However, as educators, you may also be exposed to the stories of trauma of your students and of other adults in the building. So those are both part of compassion fatigue. And we know that in addition to stress impacting educators and school staff, teacher stress impacts student stress. It's not a surprise. Research has demonstrated that when teachers are highly stressed or burned out, their students show lower levels of social adjustment, lower academic performance, and more behavior problems. Our colleagues in Canada, led by Dr. Kimberly Schonert-Reichel, has conducted several studies of teacher stress and the impact on student stress. And they found that classrooms that are led by a teacher who reported feeling overwhelmed and having high burnout had students with much higher cortisol levels or stress levels. And they would swab the inside of their cheek to get the cortisol levels, and they found that those students had higher stress levels. So there is undoubtedly a cyclical relationship between teacher stress and student stress and behavior. So we recognize that we all have different professional and life experiences. So we'd like you to think personally for a minute and just reflect to visualize your own experience with compassion fatigue, either current or past or future. And if thinking about compassion fatigue feels too heavy, you can just think about a time that work was particularly stressful. And think about in what ways did compassion fatigue or heavy stress influence your ability to do your job effectively? So just think about that for a moment. So what do we do about the fact that our teachers are stressed and burned out more than the rest of our workforce? There are two ways that we are trying to support our teachers. One is through personal well-being efforts, and another is through organizational well-being efforts. And I'm going to share just a few of the ways that we are trying to support educators in these areas. So let's first focus on personal well-being. Again, the definition of individual or personal well-being is a state of feeling satisfied, fulfilled, and having a sense of meaning or purpose. So I want you to think about how you feel when we talk about self-care. because we have had a lot of educators and others in the workforce say they are tired of being told to just take better care of themselves. They often feel like the person in this illustration. They have been trying to make lemonade out of lemons for many years. I don't know if that's an expression that you use in the Czech Republic, making lemons out of lemonade, or excuse me, making lemonade out of lemons. But what they say is that they can only handle so much. Sometimes it feels that teachers are being blamed for not taking better care of themselves when the environments are very toxic or unhealthy. So that's why one's care for personal well-being must be accompanied by organizational efforts to support teachers. It can't be that we just keep telling our teachers to take better care of themselves when we have environments that are not supportive. But self-care and personal well-being is really critical to having a healthy workforce. So we'll start with personal well-being. Lenka mentioned earlier that our colleagues at the National Center for School Mental Health, along with our colleagues at Georgetown University, developed a personal well-being course for educators, and it's available at no cost to educators. It focuses on 5 areas of personal well-being, and I'm going to go over those in a moment. We also created a similar course that's available freely to behavioral health providers, and the teacher course can be found at teacherwise.org. The provider course can be found at providerwellbeing.org. The 5 components of well-being that we focus on include physical, occupational, intellectual, social, and emotional. And I will just touch on some of the areas that we focus on with our educators in each of these domains. So in physical health, we work with our teachers on nutrition, sleep, hobbies, exercise, and music. In our occupational health section, we focus on how they can get more satisfaction and rewards from their job, how to manage their time effectively, how to overcome procrastination, how to have clear roles and expectations in their work and other parts of their life, how to get ongoing and constructive feedback, and how to seek out mentorship and feedback. The third area is intellectual health. And we work with our teachers on areas that they can grow and flourish in terms of their intellect, but also we work with them on how to find meaning in their life and in their work. We work with them on how to seek out continued professional development so that they're growing in their work, and how to find intellectual stimulation. When we work with our teachers on the social health domain, we're working on helping them identify positive social relationships and social encounters and trying to avoid toxic or unhealthy social relationships. We work with them on feeling connected, working with them also on how to express their feelings openly, and receiving unconditional support. And finally, we work with our teachers on emotional health, where we work with them on how to feel positive emotions, but also how to manage distressing emotions. And we have an online course, but we also do a lot of live coursework with our educators where we introduce self-care planning and we go through these steps. The first step is understanding the types of stress that they're experiencing. And we use one instrument called the ProQual. You may be familiar with it. This is a free 30-item instrument that assesses compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue. There is a Czech version. and it's been translated into Czech and about 30 other languages. So it's one way for our teachers to assess how they're doing. We also have a scale that's available online that asks teachers about the 5 areas of well-being that I just mentioned. The second step that we do with our teachers is to help them identify how their personal stress manifests in terms of their physical signs. So, for example, how does stress show up in our body? Does our body become tense? Does our sleep or appetite change? Also, how does it impact our mood or our demeanor? Do we feel preoccupied, exhausted, angry, depressed? And we have all of our teachers complete a stress reaction log to rate their level of stress and how it manifests in physical and emotional states. And we have them do this for a few weeks to keep track of how they're doing. We then work with teachers on understanding their current ways of working through stress, including unhealthy and healthy ways of coping. And then we introduce additional healthy ways to respond to stress, including healthy alternative activities, problem solving, reframing, and social support. We have teachers complete a survey about how often they use these healthy ways of coping, and they can measure themselves over time to see if they improve in some of these healthy ways of coping. We then work with teachers to select new or additional coping strategies, and we work with them for several months to do this. And we have them log the stress along with any coping activities that they are starting to use. And finally, we encourage them to continue to try self-care strategies and refine them over time. So we work with teachers to develop a self-care plan and rate how their coping strategies work for them. And this course, as I said, teachers can do in a self-paced way online, or we have many state departments of education that are developing learning collaboratives for all of their educators to engage in this self-care planning process. But we can not only ask our teachers to take better care of themselves. We have to work with organizations to create environments that promote and maintain the physical, psychological, and social health of their employees. So let's focus on organizational well-being. To support schools in doing this, we developed a framework for organizational well-being in schools, and it includes 8 domains. You may notice that one of the domains is self-care, but it refers to how the organization supports self-care. And we're going to talk about each of these domains in a few moments. We developed an instrument for schools and for districts, which oversee schools, to assess their implementation of organizational well-being policies and practices. And this instrument is called the Organizational Well-being Inventory for Schools. And we have a online platform called the SHAPE system, School Health Assessment and Performance Evaluation System, where any person or any school team or any district team can go in and assess how their system is supporting the well-being of their staff. So they go on here and they do this, and it's all free because it's been supported by our federal government. And these are the domains. I won't go through all of the items, but I will make the instrument available to you. You can find it online. I'll just briefly describe each domain. So the first domain for organizational well-being is input, flexibility, and autonomy. It's the degree to which employee input is valued and incorporated into policies and practices, and the degree to which employees, educators, can work flexibly and independently. So schools will rate how well are they doing at these things, and the teachers in the school building can rate how well they think their organization does this. So schools typically invite all of their teachers to complete the assessment, and then all of the scores are aggregated, put together, so that the school leadership gets a report and can see the areas where they're doing well and the areas where they need to improve. The second domain is work, climate, and environment. And this focuses on the physical and emotional climate of the school. So it includes how well the physical space is maintained, the lighting, the atmosphere of the school, as well as whether policies support a friendly and supportive work environment in which employee rights are clear and protected. Professional development and recognition, the next domain, includes efforts to train employees on relevant job skills and to acknowledge and reward job performance, professional accomplishments, and personal milestones and successes. Organizational and supervisory support means that employees have that support to define and navigate job responsibilities and that they are evaluated fairly. The next domain is self-care, and this includes the organization's efforts to assess and foster employee self-care, including education and training in job stress and self-care, accessible employee assistance programs. So in the US, any employee can access mental health support if they need it, but we ask schools about how easy is it to access, and do your employees know how to access that program? And opportunities for mindfulness and breaks throughout the day. So is the organization supporting self-care? We can ask our teachers to take better care of themselves, but if the organization does not create the time, the space, and the support for self-care, teachers won't be able to do it. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. This is about organizational efforts to ensure that multiple perspectives are represented, respected, and valued. So in some schools, only some people's opinions are valued. And this means that a diversity of opinions and values are respected, that all members of the school are being treated fairly and justly, and that space is made for the characteristics that each educator brings, and that diverse individuals are engaged in all aspects of organizational work, including the decision-making process. So, for example, that would mean that even new teachers have input into what's happening in the school, including decisions, not just people who've been in the school for 20 years plus. Purpose and meaningfulness is another domain, and this includes organizational strategies to align employee work with their personal values and strengths, and to provide work that's meaningful to employees. This is one of the most important factors that keeps people in their job. And finally, professional quality of life. This domain assesses the extent to which organizations create day-to-day work an environment, day-to-day environment, in which employees have positive collegial relationships and derive pleasure from doing their work well. So it's a place where people can connect and can find joy in their work. So those are the 8 domains. And we have our educators go in and take a survey, a brief survey. As you saw, the domains are about 8 items. And they complete each of the domains, and then it generates a summary report for that person, or if it's multiple people from a school, there'll be a summary report for this school. And there is a summary report for the school administrators, and it shows how the school is doing in each of those domains. So you can see here, red, emerging, means they need significant improvement in that domain. So in this case, they are not doing as well in the purpose and meaningfulness domain. And then if you move up, it's called progressing. So they're doing better, but they could do more. And there are 3 domains on this report that are in that middle area. And then finally, there were 4 domains that were rated as proficient. So they're doing pretty well. We then give our schools and our educators a strategic planning guide. So they use the information from the report to prioritize 1 or 2 improvement areas based on the need, the desire, and the resources to support change. And then they develop a meaningful, measurable goal. So I'll give you 2 examples of measurable goals that some of our schools came up with. So the first goal was in the domain of input, flexibility, and autonomy. And their goal was, by the end of the school year, the district school administration will collect anonymous surveys from the entire school staff regarding organizational climate. The district school administration will then use the data to review the top areas of concern for staff and develop an action plan to address the top 1 or 2 areas highlighted by staff. The second goal that was developed by another school was in the area of professional development and recognition. The goal was, by the end of the first month of school, district schools' employee wellness committees will create a bulletin board in the staff lounge to highlight employees' professional accomplishments and personal milestones, and will regularly update the board to highlight the diversity of interests and accomplishments at their school. So those are just 2 examples of concrete goals that schools have set to work on organizational well-being. School staff are then asked to define success and to create an action plan with short and long-term steps. And we have now been generating these strategic plans with schools and districts throughout the United States for the past couple of years. And it's helpful in that educators feel that their organizations are actually making efforts to support their well-being instead of just the educators working on their own personal well-being. Both are important. So I'll close today by encouraging you to reflect on what is one step that you will take to further your own personal well-being this week or this month, and what is one step that you will take to further your organization's well-being efforts this week or this month or this year. Thank you so much again for the invitation to share with you all. I appreciate all of your efforts toward supporting educator and student well-being, and I look forward to partnering with you all on your efforts. Thank you.
Sharon, moc ti děkujeme za prezentaci. Doufám, že jsi slyšela potlesk z publika, pokud ne, tak byl velký. Máme prostor pro několik otázek, ne mnoho, protože nás maličko tlačí čas, ale ráda bych tu příležitost na to se Sharon zeptat na něco, co by mohlo být inspirací pro naše školy, pro nějaké konkrétní kroky, které se mohou stát. Tak kdokoliv by měl dotaz, můžete ho položit v češtině, bude přetlumočen, takže se vůbec nemusíte bát. Tak je nějaký dotaz v publiku?
Dobrý den, já bych se chtěla zeptat, říkám to dobře, jak se vám podařilo navázat spolupráci a vlastně vydobít si podporu federální vlády, že to vlastně je podpora, která je systematická a systémová?
Thank you for the question. So actually, our federal government about 30 years ago recognized the importance of integrating mental health into education and invested in 2 centers to support that. So that was in 1995. But it was a little bit of support. In the last 5 years, our federal government has recognized, in part because of the growing youth mental health crisis, that schools are an absolutely essential place to support student well-being and mental health. Our students are not making it to traditional community mental health settings when they need help. And we've been growing the research evidence now for 2 decades to show that young people do much better, both academically, but also in terms of their mental health, if they receive support in schools. And even for our students who are struggling with mental health challenges, they are much more likely to start and to receive mental health care when it's offered in the school setting. They're about 6 times more likely to complete mental health treatment when it's offered in schools. So in the context of COVID, our federal government has invested billions of dollars to support mental health in schools. And because so many teachers were leaving the field, they've now started focusing more on educator well-being, and they're supporting states. So it's both our federal government, but also our state governments are now supporting investment in teacher well-being because they need teachers in the buildings. And if they don't support their well-being, they're leaving the profession.
Tak děkujeme moc. Tak ještě nějaký další dotaz? Já jeden mám. Já bych se chtěla Sharon zeptat, co by doporučila škole, která chce s podporou wellbeingu učitelů začít, tak vlastně na co nasměřovat tu pozornost a jaké třeba konkrétní opatření může být takový rychlý quick win, který může ukázat, že to má smysl a že se touto cestou máme vydat.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have learned that I mentioned in the talk is that organizations need to start with themselves. So schools historically have often just told teachers self-care is important. You know, they might do a walking Wednesday, we joke, they might do a walking Wednesday or a yoga Tuesday. But it's really important that they actually take a more systemic look at their policies and practices, which is why we developed this inventory with these 8 areas so that schools can actually do a more serious look at what they're doing to promote and to hurt staff well-being. And it's important, you know, a lot of schools will develop a well-being committee. It's important that that committee look at not only how can teachers focus on personal well-being, but what is the organization doing to actually focus on their own policies and practices. One way of doing that is to do a survey of their school staff and find out how do the school staff perceive the school in terms of efforts to promote well-being, and what could they be doing better? What are they already doing well? And really be open to input from the broader school community. And then engage in active quality improvement. So it's no good just to do the survey and then not do anything, right? We see that a lot. We see a lot of organizational climate surveys and then no action is taken. So establishing a well-being committee and focusing more than just personal well-being, and really acknowledging that it's a difficult job and that we need to do better for our educators. And then taking small action steps to improve organizational well-being for our staff.
Tak děkuji moc, Sharon, za tvoje vystoupení i za odpovědi na naše otázky. My v partnerství pro vzdělávání naší pracovní skupině zaměřené na wellbeing teď dokončujeme publikaci, která se právě zaměřuje na ten wellbeing ve škole v tom smyslu, jak podpořit pedagogy těmi opatřeními, které se na školu vážou. Takže to je takový malý teaser, že je to další vlastně z publikací, která tento rok spatří světlo světa a vlastně vycházíme jak ze zahraničních zkušeností, tak právě i ze zkušeností mnoha českých škol, mimo jiné třeba i ze zkušeností gymnázia v Poličce. Jehož pan ředitel tady dneska byl. Tak já už předám slovo moderátorům. Ještě jednou veliké díky, Sharon. A máváme.
A potlesk, který jde slyšet až do Ameriky.